Section 7 of Pensees. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Derek McLaughlin, London, Ontario, Canada. Latin language reading by Lenny, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Pensees by Blaise Pascal. Translated by W. F. Trotter. Section 7. Morality and Doctrine. Part 1. 425. Second part. That man without faith cannot know the true good, nor justice. All men seek happiness. This is without exception. Whatever different means they employ, they all tend to this end. The cause of some going to war, and of others avoiding it, is the same desire in both, attended with different views. The will never takes the least step but to this object. This is the motive of every action of every man, even of those who hang themselves. And yet, after such a great number of years, no one without faith has reached the point to which all continually look. All complain, princes and subjects, noblemen and commoners, old and young, strong and weak, learned and ignorant, healthy and sick, of all countries, all times, all ages, and all conditions. A trial so long, so continuous, and so uniform should certainly convince us of our inability to reach the good by our own efforts. But example teaches us little. No resemblance is ever so perfect that there is not some slight difference, and hence we expect that our hope will not be deceived on this occasion as before. And thus, while the present never satisfies us, experience dupes us, and from misfortune to misfortune leads us to death, their eternal crown. What is it then that this desire and this inability proclaim to us, but that there was once in man a true happiness, of which there now remain to him only the mark and empty trace, which he in vain tries to fill from all his surroundings, seeking from things absent the help he does not obtain in things present? But these are all inadequate, because the infinite abyss can only be filled by an infinite and immutable object, that is to say, only by God himself. He only is our true good, and since we have forsaken him, it is a strange thing that there is nothing in nature which has not been serviceable in taking his place. The stars, the heavens, earth, the elements, plants, cabbages, leeks, animals, insects, calves, serpents, fever, pestilence, war, famine, vices, adultery, incest. And since man has lost the true good, everything can appear equally good to him, even his own destruction, though so opposed to God, to reason, and to the whole course of nature. Some seek good in authority, others in scientific research, others in pleasure. Others, who are in fact nearer the truth, have considered it necessary that the universal good, which all men desire, should not consist in any of the particular things which can only be possessed by one man, and which, when shared, afflict their possessor more by the want of the part he has not, than they please him by the possession of what he has. They have learned that the true good should be such as all can possess at once, without diminution and without envy, and which no one can lose against his will. And their reason is that this desire being natural to man, since it is necessarily in all, and that it is impossible not to have it, they infer from it. Note: in the text the thought is incomplete. End of note. 426. True nature being lost, everything becomes its own nature. As the true good being lost, everything becomes its own true good. 427. Man does not know in what rank to place himself. He has plainly gone astray and fallen from his true place without being able to find it again. He seeks it anxiously and unsuccessfully everywhere in impenetrable darkness. 428. If it is a sign of weakness to prove God by nature, do not despise Scripture. If it is a sign of strength to have known these contradictions, esteem Scripture. 429. The vileness of man in submitting himself to the brutes, and in even worshipping them. 430. For Port Royal, the beginning after having explained the incomprehensibility. The greatness and the wretchedness of man are so evident that the true religion must necessarily teach us both that there is in man some great source of greatness, and a great source of wretchedness. It must then give us a reason for these astonishing contradictions. In order to make man happy, it must prove to him that there is a God, that we ought to love him, that our true happiness is to be in him, and our sole evil to be separated from him. It must recognize that we are full of darkness which hinders us from knowing and loving him, and that thus, as our duties compel us to love God, and our lusts turn us away from him, we are full of unrighteousness. It must give us an explanation of our opposition to God and to our own good. It must teach us the remedies for these infirmities, and the means of obtaining these remedies. Let us therefore examine all the religions of the world, and see if there be any other than the Christian which is sufficient for this purpose. Shall it be that of the philosophers, who put forward as the chief good the good which is in ourselves? Is this the true good? Have they found the remedy for our ills? Is man's pride cured by placing him on an equality with God? Have those who have made us equal to the brutes, or the Mohammedans who have offered us earthly pleasures as the chief good even in eternity, produced the remedy for our lusts? What religion then will teach us to cure pride and lust? What religion will in fact teach us our good, our duties, the weakness which turns us from them, the cause of this weakness, the remedies which can cure it, and the means of obtaining these remedies? All other religions have not been able to do so. Let us see what the wisdom of God will do. Expect neither truth, she says, nor consolation from men. I am she who formed you, and who alone can teach you what you are. But you are now no longer in the state in which I formed you. I created man holy, innocent, perfect. I filled him with light and intelligence. I communicated to him my glory and my wonders. The eye of man saw then the majesty of God. He was not then in the darkness which blinds him, nor subject to mortality and the woes which afflict him. But he has not been able to sustain so great glory without falling into pride. He wanted to make himself his own center, and independent of my help. He withdrew himself from my rule, and on making himself equal to me by the desire of finding his happiness in himself, I abandoned him to himself. And setting in revolt the creatures that were subject to him, I made them his enemies, so that man is now become like the brutes, and so estranged from me that there scarce remains to him a dim vision of his author. So far has all his knowledge been extinguished or disturbed. The senses, independent of reason, and often the masters of reason, have led him into pursuit of pleasure. All creatures either torment or tempt him, and domineer over him, either subduing him by their strength, or fascinating him by their charms, a tyranny more awful and more imperious. Such is the state in which men now are. There remains to them some feeble instinct of the happiness of their former state, and they are plunged in the evils of their blindness and their lust, which have become their second nature. From this principle which I disclose to you, you can recognize the cause of those contradictions which have astonished all men, and have divided them into parties holding so different views. Observe now all the feelings of greatness and glory which the experience of so many woes cannot stifle, and see if the cause of them must not be in another nature. For Port Royal tomorrow. Prosopopoeia. It is in vain, O men, that you seek within yourselves the remedy for your ills. All your light can only reach the knowledge that not in yourselves will you find truth or good. The philosophers have promised you that, and have been unable to do it. They neither know what is your true good, nor what is your true state. How could they have given remedies for your ills, when they did not even know them? Your chief maladies are pride, which takes you away from God, and lust, which binds you to earth, and they have done nothing else but cherish one or other of these diseases. If they gave you God as an end, it was only to administer to your pride. They made you think that you are by nature like him, and conformed to him. And those who saw the absurdity of this claim put you on another precipice, by making you understand that your nature was like that of the brutes, and led you to seek your good in the lusts which are shared by the animals. This is not the way to cure you of your unrighteousness, which these wise men never knew. I alone can make you understand who you are. Adam, Jesus Christ. If you are united to God, it is by grace, not by nature. If you are humbled, it is by penitence, not by nature. Thus this double capacity. You are not in the state of your creation. As these two states are open, it is impossible for you not to recognize them. Follow your own feelings, observe yourselves, and see if you do not find the lively characteristics of these two natures. Could so many contradictions be found in a simple subject? Incomprehensible. Not all that is incomprehensible ceases to exist. Infinite number, an infinite space equal to a finite. Incredible that God should unite himself to us. This consideration is drawn only from the sight of our vileness. But if you are quite sincere over it, follow it as far as I have done, and recognize that we are indeed so vile that we are incapable in ourselves of knowing if his mercy cannot make us capable of him. For I would know how this animal, who knows himself to be so weak, has the right to measure the mercy of God and set limits to it, suggested by his own fancy. He has so little knowledge of what God is that he does not know what he himself is, and, completely disturbed at the sight of his own state, dares to say that God cannot make him capable of communion with him. But I would ask him if God demands anything else from him than the knowledge and love of him, and why, since his nature is capable of love and knowledge, he believes that God cannot make himself known and loved by him. Doubtless he knows at least that he exists, and that he loves something. Therefore, if he sees anything in the darkness wherein he is, and if he finds some object of his love among the things on earth, why, if God impart to him some ray of his essence, will he not be capable of knowing and of loving him in the manner in which it shall please him to communicate himself to us? There must then be certainly an intolerable presumption in this sort of arguments, although they seem founded on an apparent humility, which is neither sincere nor reasonable, if it does not make us admit that, not knowing of ourselves what we are, we can only learn it from God. I do not mean that you should submit your belief to me without reason, and I do not aspire to overcome you by tyranny. In fact, I do not claim to give you a reason for everything. And to reconcile these contradictions, I intend to make you see clearly, by convincing proofs, those divine signs in me which may convince you of what I am, and may gain authority for me by wonders and proofs which you cannot reject, so that you may then believe without the things which I teach you, since you will find no other ground for rejecting them, except that you cannot know of yourselves if they are true or not. God has willed to redeem men, and to open salvation to those who seek it. But men render themselves so unworthy of it, that it is right that God should refuse to some, because of their obduracy, what he grants to others from a compassion which is not due to them. If he had willed to overcome the obstinacy of the most hardened, he could have done so by revealing himself so manifestly to them that they could not have doubted of the truth of his essence, as it will appear at the last day, with such thunders and such a convulsion of nature that the dead will rise again, and the blindest will see him. It is not in this manner that he has willed to appear in his advent of mercy, because, as so many make themselves unworthy of his mercy, he has willed to leave them in the loss of the good which they do not want. It was not then right that he should appear in a manner manifestly divine, and completely capable of convincing all men, but it was also not right that he should come in so hidden a manner that he could not be known by those who should sincerely seek him. He has willed to make himself quite recognizable by those, and thus, willing to appear openly to those who seek him with all their heart, and to be hidden from those who flee from him with all their heart, he so regulates the knowledge of himself that he has given signs of himself, visible to those who seek him, and not to those who seek him not. There is enough light for those who only desire to see, and enough obscurity for those who have a contrary disposition. 431. No other religion has recognized that man is the most excellent creature. Some, which have quite recognized the reality of his excellence, have considered as mean and ungrateful the low opinions which men naturally have of themselves, and others, which have thoroughly recognized how real is this vileness, have treated with proud ridicule those feelings of greatness which are equally natural to man. Lift your eyes to God, say the first. See him whom you resemble, and who has created you to worship him. You can make yourselves like unto him, Wisdom will make you equal to him if you will follow it. Raise your heads, free men, says Epictetus, and others say, bend your eyes to the earth, wretched worm that you are, and consider the brutes whose companions you are. What then will man become? Will he be equal to God or the brutes? What a frightful difference! What then shall we be? Who does not see from all this that man has gone astray, that he has fallen from his place, that he anxiously seeks it, and that he cannot find it again? And who shall then direct him to it? The greatest men have failed. 432. Skepticism is true, for, after all, men before Jesus Christ did not know where they were, nor whether they were great or small. And those who have said the one or the other knew nothing about it, and guessed without reason and by chance. They also erred always in excluding the one or the other.
Quod ergo ignorantes quaeritis religio annuntiat vobis.
Footnote: What therefore ye ignorantly seek, religion proclaims to you. Compare Acts chapter 17, verse 23. End of footnote. 433. After having understood the whole nature of man. That a religion may be true, it must have knowledge of our nature. It ought to know its greatness and littleness, and the reason of both. What religion but the Christian has known this? 434. The chief arguments of the skeptics, I pass over the lesser ones, are that we have no certainty of the truth of these principles apart from faith and revelation, except in so far as we naturally perceive them in ourselves. Now this natural intuition is not a convincing proof of their truth, since, having no certainty apart from faith whether man was created by a good God, or by a wicked demon, or by chance, it is doubtful whether these principles given to us are true, or false, or uncertain according to our origin. Again, no person is certain, apart from faith, whether he is awake or sleeps, seeing that during sleep we believe as firmly as we do that we are awake. We believe that we see space, figure, and motion. We are aware of the passage of time. We measure it. And in fact we act as if we were awake. So that half our life being passed in sleep, we have on our own admission no idea of truth, whatever we may imagine. As all our intuitions are then illusions, who knows whether the other half of our life, in which we think we are awake, is not another sleep a little different from the former, from which we awake when we suppose ourselves asleep? And who doubts that, if we dreamt in company, and the dreams chanced to agree, which is common enough, and if we were always alone when awake, we should believe that matters were reversed? In short, as we often dream that we dream, heaping dream upon dream, may it not be that this half of our life, wherein we think ourselves awake, is itself only a dream on which the others are grafted, from which we wake at death, during which we have as few principles of truth and good as during natural sleep, these different thoughts which disturb us being perhaps only illusions, like the flight of time and the vain fancies of our dreams. These are the chief arguments on one side and the other. I omit minor ones, such as the skeptical talk against the impressions of custom, education, manners, country, and the like. Though these influence the majority of common folk, who dogmatize only on shallow foundations, they are upset by the least breath of the skeptics. We have only to see their books if we are not sufficiently convinced of this, and we shall very quickly become so, perhaps too much. I notice the only strong point of the dogmatists, namely that, speaking in good faith and sincerely, we cannot doubt natural principles. Against this the skeptics set up in one word the uncertainty of our origin, which includes that of our nature. The dogmatists have been trying to answer this objection ever since the world began. So there is open war among men, in which each must take a part, and side either with dogmatism or skepticism. For he who thinks to remain neutral is above all a skeptic. This neutrality is the essence of the sect. He who is not against them is essentially for them. In this appears their advantage. They are not for themselves. They are neutral, indifferent, in suspense as to all things, even themselves being no exception. What then shall man do in this state? Shall he doubt everything? Shall he doubt whether he is awake, whether he is being pinched, or whether he is being burned? Shall he doubt whether he doubts? Shall he doubt whether he exists? We cannot go so far as that, and I lay down as a fact that there never has been a real complete skeptic. Nature sustains our feeble reason, and prevents it raving to this extent. Shall he then say, on the contrary, that he certainly possesses truth, he who, when pressed ever so little, can show no title to it, and is forced to let go his hold? What a chimera, then, is man! What a novelty! What a monster! What a chaos! What a contradiction! What a prodigy! Judge of all things, imbecile worm of the earth, depository of truth, a sink of uncertainty and error, the pride and refuse of the universe. Who will unravel this tangle? Nature confutes the skeptics, and reason confutes the dogmatists. What then will you become, O men, who try to find out by your natural reason what is your true condition? You cannot avoid one of these sects, nor adhere to one of them. Know then, proud man, what a paradox you are to yourself. Humble yourself, weak reason. Be silent, foolish nature. Learn that man infinitely transcends man, and learn from your master your true condition, of which you are ignorant. Hear God. For in fact, if man had never been corrupt, he would enjoy in his innocence both truth and happiness with assurance, and if man had always been corrupt, he would have no idea of truth or bliss. But, wretched as we are, and more so than if there were no greatness in our condition, we have an idea of happiness, and cannot reach it. We perceive an image of truth, and possess only a lie. Incapable of absolute ignorance and of certain knowledge, we have thus been manifestly in a degree of perfection from which we have unhappily fallen. It is, however, an astonishing thing that the mystery furthest removed from our knowledge, namely, that of the transmission of sin, should be a fact without which we can have no knowledge of ourselves. For it is beyond doubt that there is nothing which more shocks our reason than to say that the sin of the first man has rendered guilty those who, being so removed from this source, seem incapable of participation in it. This transmission does not only seem to us impossible, it seems also very unjust. For what is more contrary to the rules of our miserable justice than to damn eternally an infant incapable of will for a sin wherein he seems to have so little a share, that it was committed 6,000 years before he was in existence? Certainly nothing offends us more rudely than this doctrine, and yet, without this mystery, the most incomprehensible of all, we are incomprehensible to ourselves. The knot of our condition takes its twists and turns in this abyss, so that man is more inconceivable without this mystery than this mystery is inconceivable to man. Whence it seems that God, willing to render the difficulty of our existence unintelligible to ourselves, has concealed the knot so high, or better speaking, so low, that we are quite incapable of reaching it, so that it is not by the proud exertions of our reason, but by the simple submission of reason, that we can truly know ourselves. These foundations, solidly established on the inviolable authority of religion, make us know that there are two truths of faith equally certain: the one, that man, in the state of creation, or in that of grace, is raised above all nature, made like unto God and sharing in his divinity; the other, that in the state of corruption and sin he is fallen from this state, and made like unto the beasts. These two propositions are equally sound and certain. Scripture manifestly declares this to us, when it says in some places,
Deliciae meae esse cum filiis hominum.
Footnote: Proverbs chapter 8, verse 31. Rejoicing in his habitable earth, and my delight was with the sons of men. End of footnote.
Effundum spiritum meum super omnem carnem.
Footnote: Isaiah chapter 44, verse 3. For I will pour water upon him that is thirsty, and streams upon the dry ground. I will pour my spirit upon thy seed, and my blessing upon thine offspring. Joel chapter 2, verse 28. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. End of footnote.
Dii estis.
Footnote: Psalm 82, verse 6. I said, Ye are gods, and all of you sons of the Most High. End of footnote. And in other places,
Omnis caro foenum.
Footnote: Isaiah chapter 40, verse 6. The voice of one saying, Cry. And one said, What shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all the goodliness thereof is as the flower of the field. End of footnote.
Homo assimilatus est iumentis incipientibus, et similis factus est illis.
Footnote: Psalm 49, verse 20. Man that is in honor and understandeth not is like the beasts that perish. End of footnote.
Dixin corde meo, de filiis hominum.
Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Whence it clearly seems that man by grace is made like unto God, and a partaker in his divinity, and that without grace he is like unto the brute beasts. 435. Without this divine knowledge, what could men do but either become elated by the inner feeling of their past greatness, which still remains to them, or become despondent at the sight of their present weakness? For, not seeing the whole truth, they could not attain to perfect virtue. Some, considering nature as incorrupt, others as incurable, they could not escape either pride or sloth, the two sources of all vice, since they cannot but either abandon themselves to it through cowardice, or escape it by pride. For if they knew the excellence of man, they were ignorant of his corruption, so that they easily avoided sloth, but fell into pride. And if they recognized the infirmity of nature, they were ignorant of its dignity, so that they could easily avoid vanity, but it was to fall into despair. Thence arise the different schools of the Stoics and Epicureans, the dogmatists, academicians, etc. The Christian religion alone has been able to cure these two vices, not by expelling the one through means of the other according to the wisdom of the world, but by expelling both according to the simplicity of the gospel. For it teaches the righteous that it raises them even to a participation in divinity itself, that in this lofty state they still carry the source of all corruption, which renders them during all their life subject to error, misery, death, and sin, and it proclaims to the most ungodly that they are capable of the grace of their Redeemer. So making those tremble whom it justifies, and consoling those whom it condemns, religion so justly tempers fear with hope through that double capacity of grace and of sin, common to all, that it humbles infinitely more than reason alone can do, but without despair, and it exalts infinitely more than natural pride, but without inflating, thus making it evident that alone being exempt from error and vice, it alone fulfills the duty of instructing and correcting men. Who then can refuse to believe and adore this heavenly light? For is it not clearer than day that we perceive within ourselves ineffaceable marks of excellence? And is it not equally true that we experience every hour the results of our deplorable condition? What does this chaos and monstrous confusion proclaim to us but the truth of these two states, with a voice so powerful that it is impossible to resist it? 436. Weakness. Every pursuit of men is to get wealth, and they cannot have a title to show that they possess it justly, for they have only that of human caprice, nor have they strength to hold it securely. It is the same with knowledge, for disease takes it away. We are incapable both of truth and goodness. 437. We desire truth and find within ourselves only uncertainty. We seek happiness and find only misery and death. We cannot but desire truth and happiness, and are incapable of certainty or happiness. This desire is left to us, partly to punish us, partly to make us perceive wherefrom we are fallen. 438. If man is not made for God, why is he only happy in God? If man is made for God, why is he so opposed to God? 439. Nature corrupted. Man does not act by reason, which constitutes his being. 440. The corruption of reason is shown by the existence of so many different and extravagant customs. It was necessary that truth should come, in order that man should no longer dwell within himself. 441. For myself, I confess that so soon as the Christian religion reveals the principle that human nature is corrupt and fallen from God, that opens my eyes to see everywhere the mark of this truth. For nature is such that she testifies everywhere, both within man and without him, to a lost God and a corrupt nature. 442. Man's true nature, his true good, true virtue, and true religion are things of which the knowledge is inseparable. 443. Greatness, wretchedness. The more light we have, the more greatness and the more baseness we discover in man. Ordinary men, those who are more educated, philosophers, they astonish ordinary men. Christians, they astonish philosophers. Who will then be surprised to see that religion only makes us know profoundly what we already know in proportion to our light? 444. This religion taught to her children what men have only been able to discover by their greatest knowledge. 445. Original sin is foolishness to men, but it is admitted to be such. You must not then reproach me for the want of reason in this doctrine, since I admit it to be without reason. But this foolishness is wiser than all the wisdom of men.
Sapientius est hominibus.
For without this, what can we say that man is? His whole state depends on this imperceptible point. And how should it be perceived by his reason, since it is a thing against reason, and since reason, far from finding it out by her own ways, is averse to it when it is presented to her? 446. Of original sin. Ample tradition of original sin according to the Jews. On the word in Genesis chapter 8, verse 21. The imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Ar Moses Hadarshan. This evil leaven is placed in man from the time that he is formed. Masachet Sucha. This evil leaven has 7 names in Scripture. It is called evil, the foreskin, uncleanness, and enemy, a scandal, a heart of stone, the north wind. All this signifies the malignity which is concealed and impressed in the heart of man. Midrash Tilim says the same thing, and that God will deliver the good nature of man from the evil. This malignity is renewed every day against man, as it is written, Psalm 37, verse 32, The wicked watcheth the righteous, and seeketh to slay him. But God will not abandon him. This malignity tries the heart of man in this life, and will accuse him in the other. All this is found in the Talmud. Midrash Tilhim on Psalm 4, verse 4, Stand in awe and sin not. Stand in awe and be afraid of your lust, and it will not lead you into sin. And on Psalm 36, verse 1, The wicked has said within his own heart, Let not the fear of God be before me. That is to say, that the malignity natural to man has said that to the wicked. Midrash El Kohelet. Better is a poor and wise child than an old and foolish king who cannot foresee the future. The child is virtue, and the king is the malignity of man. It is called king because all the members obey it, and old because it is in the human heart from infancy to old age, and foolish because it leads man in the way of perdition, which he does not foresee. The same thing is in Midrash Tilim. Bereshit Rabbah on Psalm 35, verse 10. Lord, all my bones shall bless thee, which deliverest the poor from the tyrant. And is there a greater tyrant than the evil leaven? And on Proverbs chapter 25, verse 21, If thine enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat. That is to say, if the evil leaven hunger, give him the bread of wisdom, of which it is spoken in Proverbs chapter 9. And if he be thirsty, give him the water of which it is spoken in Isaiah chapter 55. Midrash Tilhim says the same thing, and that Scripture in that passage, speaking of the enemy, means the evil leaven, and that in giving him that bread and that water we heap coals of fire on his head. Midrash El Kohelet on Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 14. A great king besieged a little city. This great king is the evil leaven. The great bulwarks built against it are temptations, and there has been found a poor wise man who has delivered it, that is to say, virtue. And on Psalm 41, verse 1, Blessed is he that considereth the poor. And on Psalm 78, verse 39, The spirit passeth away, and cometh not again. Whence some have erroneously argued against the immortality of the soul. But the sense is that this spirit is the evil leaven, which accompanies man till death, and will not return at the resurrection. And on Psalm 103, the same thing. And on Psalm 16. Principles of Rabbinism, 2 Messiahs. 447. Will it be said that, as men have declared that righteousness has departed the earth, they therefore knew of original sin?
Nemo ante orbitum beatus est.
Footnote, no one is happy before he is dead. End of footnote. That is to say, they knew death to be the beginning of eternal and essential happiness. 448. Miton sees well that nature is corrupt and that men are averse to virtue, but he does not know why they cannot fly higher. 449. Order. After corruption to say, it is right that all those who are in that state should know it, both those who are content with it and those who are not content with it, but it is not right that all should see redemption. End of section 7, part 1.